Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Extreme Desert Challenge. Last time we left off after what was a bit of an uneventful episode, I think. Steak has now received a throne room and a top hat, and we also got some electricity going, even though of course our setup will be expanded soon. By the way, just in case you're wondering why the audio sounds a little different today, I have upgraded my recording setup and I'm now using the Shure SM7B microphone, which of course does sound a little different compared to my old one. I'm still tweaking the settings here and there, so there might be some slight changes in between episodes for the next few days, but all in all, this is what you can expect my videos to sound like going forward. Now, one more thing that we have to talk about before we jump into today's episode: Rimworld has received a new update. We are now on version 1.2 and that has brought with it a couple of changes. However, the effect on our colony at the moment is rather small. Now, one thing that is new, for example, are permits, which are automatically unlocked as we ascend the ranks of royalty. However, we have to choose what kind of permit we want. Since Steak is only an acolyte, we can also only choose between a trooper squad and a laborer team, so either some help in fending off enemies or some assistance for work around the base. And I think we're going with the trooper squad here. Not only does it have the shorter cooldown time with 40 days instead of 60, but all things considered it might also be much more critical to our survival. Now, one more thing that was mentioned in the comments of the last episode was Edmo's shield belt, because of course it does prevent him from firing his gun. Now, the 1.2 update kind of changed a bit how belts in this game work, as some of them can now be toggled on or off, but the shield belt is unaffected by that and therefore useless to Edmo as long as he's carrying a gun. Now, at this point here, also a small trick. Since our iguana Biceps is currently ill with the flu, Red Hawk is now attempting to feed it, and as you can see, she's about to use a simple meal for that. That is of course something we do not want to happen. However, as long as Biceps is resting on the animal's sleeping spot, she will not eat by herself. So we can quickly remove that sleeping spot, have her fill up and then put it back down, and everything is fine, and our colonists can now use the meal for themselves. So that brings us to our first project of the episode, and it might look a bit confusing here, but all we're trying to do is construct a small workshop. As we're doing that, we also have some travelers passing by, but they are of no use to us as they have nothing to trade. Unfortunately, our project is then also quickly halted again, as our two builders, Edmo and Steak, come down with the flu. Now, they may have gotten it from Biceps over in the stables, who knows. What is certain is that they will now need a lot of rest and, of course, some proper medical care. Now, the flu has to be treated quite frequently, but Red Hawk is a rather competent doctor, so I think 1 or 2 rounds of herbal medicine should be enough and then we can go to treatment without medicine. For the time being though, this means that work around the colony is significantly slowed down. Neither Red Hawk nor Troy are really capable of continuing the construction work, and so the day unfortunately passes by without much progress. In the evening, Red Hawk can then administer the next dose of medicine, and while she does, she even receives a trade inspiration, so the next transaction that she makes will be a lot more lucrative. For now though, she can get some sleep, just like the rest of our colony, and we can skip ahead to the next morning. And since his treatment is going well, we are using Edmo here to do a bit of forced labor. Our base is currently wide open on this side, so the least we can do, I think, is patch up the holes. Afterwards, he can then go back to bed, and so another day continues to pass, until in the afternoon we hear from Troy, who has finished his research of solar panels. This means we now have a second way of generating electricity, so establishing a steady supply is becoming more and more realistic. Up next, we're now going to research air conditioning. This was what many of you favored in the comments of the last episode, and I agree it is one of the better choices available to us at the moment, as it will make our food production a bit less cyclical, if you will. In the evening then we can watch as Red Hawk brings in a big pile of freshly chopped wood, and then night slowly sets across the desert. And with everyone asleep, we can allow our 2 infected ones to grab some food for themselves. And yes, we are already down to our kibble reserves. Our rice and potatoes still take a while longer until they're fully matured and ready to harvest. A little later that night we then also have some rain set in, and this is actually something I had been waiting for, because all of that blood around the base will now finally be washed away. In the morning then it is time for the next round of treatment, but this time without medicine. Both Edmo and Steak are making good progress building up immunity, so if we just give them a bit more rest then they should be fine. Now, unfortunately, the same cannot be said for our iguana Biceps, who is actually lacking behind and will most certainly die if we don't do anything about it. So let's take care of her with a bit of herbal medicine as well. Luckily, we still have some left over, and then all we can do is hope that we didn't come too late. In the meantime though, we have a sizable trade caravan arrive, and since the Redhawk's trade abilities are still inspired, let's send her over and see what these guys have for sale. Okay, so this is something I have been waiting for some time. The trader here has some ducks for sale and I think we'll buy them all. Chickens would have worked as well. Both are good early game animals to kind of diversify that food portfolio. We will also buy all of the herbal medicine and sell a bunch of useless clothing. In the end, we almost break even, but most importantly, we acquire 3 new animals. And of course, all 3 of them deserve a proper name. And as always, we are using the list of names of patrons in the naming rights tier and above. And this time we have Jesse Austin, Pyroka, and Dora. Congratulations to all 3 of you. I hope you won't get eaten too soon. At least for the moment, the plan is actually to produce some eggs here. We'll see how long that lasts. Now this leaves us with the question of what to do with Biceps. And as you can see, the answer is a cruel one. An iguana and 3 ducks will likely not mesh that well, not to mention that I'm actually growing increasingly concerned regarding Biceps' survival chances. So yeah, we'll have Troy come over now to do the deed as we switch from iguana to duck. Now, since the rain is continuing to pour, we can use this opportunity to remove a few more roof tiles with Steak here. Yes, he should get some rest, but I think he can afford a few moments of work. The rain will then do the rest and wash away the filth. Now, for the rest of the day, nothing else happens, so we can already jump ahead to the next one. The caravan has already left again at this point, and Redhawk is giving out the next round of treatments, although at this point those are more of a formality. Still, I have to admit, seeing our 2 most productive colonists sidelined for so long was a bit annoying. Progress for the first few days of this episode was definitely a lot slower than I had anticipated, but I hope we can make up for that in due time. Late in the evening then, we finally have some good news as Steak reaches immunity, and as a result he is immediately up and running again. And so, during the early morning hours, our small workshop slowly starts taking shape, that is until Edmo once again has other plans. Yes, mental breaks have been a bit of a regular thing with him in the past. This one might be a bit more understandable, but still not acceptable. But luckily we have Redhawk around who knows exactly how to handle Edmo. And yes, I know there is a bit of a weird undertone to having her arrest the guy that is constantly flirting with her, but it is what it is. At least Edmo's furniture does not have to suffer any further. Despite being imprisoned, he will of course still get his treatment, while Steak finishes a second armchair for the tailoring bench. Shortly after, we can then also release Edmo again. Again, his mental break is already over, and we desperately need a few meals. Our workshop, meanwhile, is finally finished and fully operational. The 2 dumping stockpiles outside will be used to collect stone chunks, which can then be used by Redhawk to make more building materials. Edmo, however, is still not satisfied and continues to cause trouble. This time he has the lovely idea to dig up a corpse and present it for the entire colony to see. Well, to be honest, I think we can actually let him do that. Troy is busy researching and won't come out of his room anytime soon, and Steak's and Redhawk's mood is good enough to take the hit. Not to mention that we can also quickly and discreetly burn the corpse after a few moments, and luckily, as you can see, Edmo is not rushing out to grab a replacement. In the meantime, Steak has slightly expanded our storage room. I think with all the stuff that's currently in there, separating the 3 mechanoid corpses is no longer necessary. Yes, they are by far the ugliest things in the entire room, but, well, the rest isn't exactly beautiful to look at either. We can, however, at least tell our colonists to smooth the stone floor in this area. Again, the effect will be minimal, but I'd like to think that it's the civilized thing to do. For now, though, night sets across the desert and even Edmo is finally coming out of his corpse obsession, and so our colonists can now enjoy a few hours of rest. Unfortunately, though, not for long. In the early morning, we have company arrive, and not the friendly kind. This raid right here might actually be the largest one in the short history of the steakhouse. As you can see, we have 2 groups of attackers with guns, 6 of them in the north and 3 more in the south. Now, we also still have that trooper squad that we can call in should things get too dangerous, but let us at least try to solve this on our own first. For the moment, our enemies will spend a few hours preparing anyway, and so are we, for example by allowing us to close off the southern entrance to the base, so that we have a bit more control over when enemies actually walk into our traps there. Shortly after then, our enemies make the move, so let's see how this goes. To get us started, we can position Edmo in the door, ready to open fire as soon as someone gets within range, while Steak provides some backup and Red Hawk stands by to heal. For that purpose, we're also putting down a medical sleeping spot, so that she can take care of any minor injuries right here, but of course anything major and Edmo is likely out of the fight for good. Troy, meanwhile, is taking position at the southern entry, ready to open that up when things get too dangerous up north, or when we are out of traps. The first part of the fight then actually goes quite well. Edmo lands his opening volleys and 2 attackers immediately run into our traps, so I think we need only 2 more kills for this first larger group to flee. With 1 enemy alone at the door, we can then open fire with Edmo, Steak and Red Hawk simultaneously, and as you would expect, that quickly solves the problem. The remaining 3 enemies, however, seem to be very aware of the last trap and carefully navigate around it, so we might be stuck here for a little while longer. Meanwhile, the 3 enemies that came from the south have started chipping away at our walls, but for now our perimeter is holding strong, and of course we have a second line of defense as well. So back up to the top now, where the constant opening and closing of our door is keeping our enemies busy and finally gives us a chance to shoot them in the back. And with great success, another enemy goes down, and as you can see, they were carrying a big pile of medicine. Now, it looks as if the fronts have hardened at this entrance, so let's give our enemies a way in down south, which hopefully gets them moving, maybe even splits them up, and makes things a little easier for us. And indeed, 1 enemy is leaving while the other one makes another attempt at our door, with little success. This now causes 1 enemy group to flee. I think it's the 6-person squad that came from the north, so we should have a small window here to grab the medicine and some of the more valuable weapons, including some frag grenades, which can be extremely useful. Now, it appears as if only 2 enemies from that 3-person group remain, so killing 1 should be enough to drive them off as well. Unfortunately, we are unable to do that before one of them breaks through and immediately heads for the potatoes, but just a few seconds later, Edmo takes care of business. And there we are, we made it. Our biggest raid yet has been fended off, no need for any reinforcements, and we have obtained a good amount of loot. This is actually also something that changed in the 1.2 update. Enemies will now regularly carry these loot drops, if you will, which is a nice way to balance rewards from raids and helps with accumulating actually useful items, and not only weapons that no one needs. We could also capture one of our enemies here, but I'm not too keen on her skill set, so we'll treat her as a delayed casualty, and have Red Hawk get rid of her together with her companions. In the evening then, it almost looks like the raid never took place. Only a big pile of blood near the entrance kind of gives it away, but with the next rainfall that should disappear as well. Before our colonists go to sleep, Troy also finishes his research of air conditioning, so we can now build ourselves a small freezer room to store food and raw ingredients. And that is also what we're going to do before we wrap up today's episode, but first let's have Admo put up a few new traps. You never know when the next attack strikes. As you can see, we also have a bit of a food problem now. Yes, we are completely out of meals and kibble too. The only thing left is a small batch of rice that Admo can consume to keep his mood up, albeit not for long. The first thing to build is then actually not the freezer nor the adjacent kitchen, but the new prison. The old one will be repurposed as it is rather conveniently located. What was once our stone cutting room will then be split in half. One room will serve as the butchering room, the other one as the kitchen. Separating those two areas is always a good idea in my opinion to avoid the kitchen getting too dirty, which increases the chance of food poisoning, and we've had our fair share of that a few episodes ago. The cooler can then be installed in our former prison. Yes, eventually we want to build something bigger with thicker walls, but for now I think this will suffice. The door that we so wisely blocked with the crematorium last episode can of course also be removed now, and with that our new setup is more or less complete. All that's missing is some food to actually prepare any meals, which brings us to the next task. Troy can now start working on hydroponics, because growth space for crops is extremely limited, and we are probably already lacking behind and do not produce enough for our 4 colonists, so ramping up our food production should absolutely be on our to-do list. Luckily, at this point our ducks show their worth. Pyroka and Dora have both laid their first egg, so Admo can now prepare one single meal from that. Once again, he will consume it himself. He is, after all, our most fragile colonist by far, and losing him to yet another mental break is something I would like to avoid. Steak then installs the freezer, and we can immediately crank it up to full power to keep the room nice and cool. We will, however, turn it off shortly. There is no need to waste electricity on a room that doesn't hold anything. Red Hawk has also mined some steel, so we can now continue to electrify our base and install a few lights. That ensures our colonists in the workshop, butchering room and kitchen can properly see what they're doing, and we no longer need to remove any roofs to let light in. Unfortunately, the lack of food does eventually have its effects. This time, however, it is not Admo, but Troy who goes wild. He now gets himself into a fist fight with Steak, and you know what? We'll actually let the two of them duke it out. Let's see who emerges victorious. And it is in fact the instigator Troy who gets the knockout punch. Steak goes down, but at least Troy's rage comes to an end. Both of them took away their fair share of bruises though, so Red Hawk can now collect some valuable medical experience. Medicine won't be necessary for this, I think. The injuries are minor and should heal quickly. Eventually then the next morning arrives, and with it a new quest. In this one, we are being asked to distract a group of mechanoids who, as a result, will send a mech cluster our way. Now, we haven't had any experience with mech clusters yet, but just looking at the list of dangers, I am unsure whether or not we're actually ready for this yet. So, as always, I would be happy to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see us attempt this, or if you think it's too dangerous. By the way, the colonist Shaw here, who we could obtain as a reward, looks pretty useful, I think. He appears to have a versatile skill set, and the 2 smart trait makes him a quick learner, which could be interesting. However, that same trait also makes mental breaks a bit more likely, and I don't know whether our colony is stable enough to counter that long term. Additionally, the psychically sensitive trait also makes him much more susceptible to things like psychic drones, while at the same time it would make him an excellent psycaster, much more proficient actually than Steak, for example. So all in all, there is some good, there is some bad. Let me know what you think and whether or not we should tackle this quest. Shortly after, we then have the Royal Tribute Collector arrive, as you can also catch a glimpse of how I have set up our colonists' work priorities, but I think we won't give them anything for now. We don't have any prisoners, and what little gold we have I would like to keep to ourselves. At last then, it is time for the harvest and our colony can finally eat again. First, it's the rice that gets made into simple meals. Later that day then we can see Edmo and Red Hawk harvest potatoes, and in the evening our small food shelf is fully stocked again. And that, I think, is a good point to make the cut in today's episode. In the next one, we are probably trying to tackle our food shortage. We might also expand our base a bit further and make the whole place a bit more pleasant to look at. And of course, we will deal with whatever Randy Random sends our way. Now, for a change, for the outro, I will leave you with some lovely fan art that shows the intricacies of the relationships between Steak, Red Hawk and Edmo. Thank you very much, Abby, for sending me this lovely picture, and if you guys have some fan art as well, then by all means feel free to send it over. Now for today we can wrap things up right here. As always, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so already, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.